Hey Reddit, I'm writing this because I don't trust my own judgment anymore, and I need to know if I missed something obvious or if this really came out of nowhere. My wife and I have been together for 11 years, married for 8. No big drama. No explosive fights. We were one of those couples people described as low-key but solid. Same routines, shared friends, quiet nights at home. I genuinely believed we were past the risky stage. The first change wasn't suspicious. It was dull. She started saying she was tired. All the time. Too tired to talk, too tired to go out, too tired to argue. She'd come home, scroll on her phone, and go to bed early. I figured it was work stress, burnout, life. When I tried to check in, she'd say things like, "Can we not do this right now?" Or, "I just need peace when I get home." So I backed off. I gave space. I tried to be supportive, but the distance kept growing. Not angry distance, polite distance. The kind that feels respectful on the surface but empty underneath. She stopped telling me about her day. Stopped complaining. Stopped needing reassurance. At the time, I thought that meant we were stable. Now I think it meant she didn't need me anymore. I ignored that thought. I told myself I was being insecure. I told myself marriages change. What I didn't realize was that while I was trying to be patient and understanding, something else was already moving quietly in the background. And once I finally noticed it, there was no going back. What made it harder to notice was how calm everything stayed. There were no fights, no slammed doors, no accusations. She was polite, almost gentle. If I asked if something was wrong, she'd smile softly and say, "No, I'm just tired. Don't worry about me." But that calm felt curated. She stopped reacting to things that used to matter. If I came home late, she didn't ask why. If I forgot something important, she didn't get annoyed. At first, I thought, wow, she's really relaxed these days. Then I realized she wasn't relaxed. She was disengaged. She started protecting her phone in small ways. Not hiding it outright, just keeping it close. Face down on the table. Screen dimmed. Notifications silenced. When I teased her about it, she laughed and said, "You're really paying attention lately." It didn't sound like a compliment. One night, I tried to reconnect. Suggested we go out to dinner, just us. She hesitated before answering. "Maybe another time," she said. "I've just got a lot on my mind." That phrase stuck with me. A lot on her mind, but none of it seemed to involve me. Lying in bed next to her that night, I realized something uncomfortable. The house felt peaceful, but the marriage felt empty. And the scariest part wasn't that something was wrong. It was that she seemed perfectly okay with it. The moment that finally cut through the calm was embarrassingly small. She told me she'd be working late on a Thursday. Nothing unusual. She said it casually while putting on her shoes, already halfway out the door. I nodded, told her to drive safe, and went back to what I was doing. An hour later, my phone buzzed. It was her. Heading home soon. Just finishing up. That should have been reassuring. Instead, it made my stomach twist. She never texted updates like that. If she was working late, she usually just worked late. I didn't reply. Another hour passed. Then another message. "Traffic's bad. Don't wait up." When she finally came home, it was close to midnight. She moved quietly, like she didn't want to wake me, even though I was very obviously still awake. "How was work?" I asked from the couch. She paused. "Fine. Long." That was it. No complaint. No details. No venting. Just fine. Later, when we were brushing our teeth side by side, I noticed she smelled different. Not bad. Just unfamiliar. A sharper scent layered over her usual perfume. I asked, lightly, "Did you change your perfume?" She looked at me through the mirror. "No." "Why?" "No reason," I said. She turned away immediately. That night, I lay in bed replaying the timeline. The texts. The silence. The unfamiliar details that didn't belong to our life together. It wasn't enough to accuse her of anything, but it was enough to make one thing clear. Whatever was happening in her world after work, I wasn't part of it. After that night, I stopped asking questions. Not because I didn't care, but because I realized every question came with a ready-made answer. Smooth, calm, designed to close the conversation instead of open it. So I watched. I noticed how she'd get dressed for normal days with more care than she used to. How she'd check her phone right before leaving the house. Then again the moment she got back in the car. how she'd come home lighter than when she left, like something had been resolved somewhere else. The biggest change was how she treated me. She stopped needing reassurance, stopped sharing worries, stopped leaning on me in any emotional way. When I had a bad day and tried to talk about it, she listened politely, the way you listen to a coworker, not a partner. One evening, I tested something small. I told her I might be late getting home the next day. She barely looked up. Okay. No follow-up. No curiosity. No concern. That's when it hit me. She wasn't calm because she trusted me. She was calm because she was emotionally invested somewhere else. I felt stupid for not seeing it sooner, for confusing peace with intimacy, for thinking the absence of conflict meant everything was fine, because the truth was we hadn't been together in a long time. I'd just been the last one to realize it. The proof didn't come from snooping. It came from coincidence, the kind you don't forget. She left her phone on the kitchen counter while she went to shower. That alone wasn't unusual. What was unusual was that she forgot to silence it. I was pouring a glass of water when the screen lit up. A name I didn't recognize. A preview I couldn't unread. Last night was worth the wait. My chest tightened instantly. Not with rage, with a slow, sinking certainty. The kind where your brain stops arguing and just starts connecting dots. I didn't pick up the phone. I didn't unlock it. I stood there staring at the glow until the screen went dark again, like it had never happened. When she came back into the kitchen, wrapped in a towel, humming to herself, I looked at her and felt something strange. Distance. Not hurt yet. Not anger. Distance, like I'd stepped back and was seeing her from outside the marriage for the first time. How was your shower? I asked. Good, she said easily. Why? No reason. She smiled and walked past me, completely unaware that the version of our life she'd been maintaining had just cracked wide open. That night, lying next to her in bed, I didn't sleep. I replayed everything. The calm, the distance, the late nights, the lack of interest in me. It all fit now. Perfectly. The scariest part wasn't that she was cheating. It was how effortlessly she'd made room for it. And I knew then that the next step wouldn't be about catching her. It would be about surviving what came next. I didn't confront her the next day. I know that sounds strange, but once you've seen something like that, you realize confrontation is a point of no return. And I wasn't ready to cross it without understanding what I was dealing with. So instead, I tested the truth. Over breakfast, I asked casually, "Do you ever feel like we've been drifting lately?" She didn't even look up from her phone. No. Why would we be? I shrugged. Just a feeling. She sighed, annoyed but controlled. You always do this when you're stressed. You read into things. There it was. Not concern. Not curiosity. A diagnosis. Later that evening, I tried again. You've been getting a lot of messages lately. Everything okay? This time she smiled. Too calm. It's work. I already told you that. I nodded. Right. Just checking. Her shoulders relaxed, like she'd passed some invisible test. That's when I realized something important. She wasn't afraid of being caught. She was confident in her ability to manage me. Confident that gentle deflection and a little blame would keep everything where she wanted it. And maybe, until that point, she'd been right. But something had changed in me. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I wasn't searching for reassurance. I was observing. Because when someone lies comfortably, the lie becomes part of their routine. And routines eventually leave patterns behind. And I was done ignoring patterns. Once I stopped reacting, the balance shifted. She started watching me more closely. Little glances when she thought I wasn't looking. Casual questions that weren't actually casual. Why are you home so early? Who are you texting? You've been quiet lately. Everything okay? The irony wasn't lost on me. For weeks, I answered simply, calmly, the same way she had. Just tired. Work stuff. Nothing to worry about. She didn't like that. One night, she picked a fight out of nowhere. Complained that I was emotionally unavailable. That I wasn't trying anymore. I listened without interrupting, and that seemed to unsettle her even more. Aren't you going to say anything? She snapped. I'm listening, I said. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. And in a way, she was right. The version of me that chased reassurance, that tried to fix everything with patience and understanding, that guy was gone. What she didn't realize was that her routine had slipped. She'd started leaving patterns behind. Predictable days, predictable times, predictable moods after certain late nights. And once you see a pattern clearly, it stops feeling like chaos. It starts feeling like a schedule. That's when I knew I was close. Not to revenge, not to a dramatic reveal, but to clarity. And clarity, I was learning, is far more dangerous to a lie than anger ever is. The confirmation didn't come the way I expected. I wasn't digging. I wasn't following her. I wasn't checking her phone every 5 minutes. I was just paying attention. One Friday evening, she told me she'd be late again. Same tone, same casual delivery. I nodded, said okay, and watched her leave. About an hour later, my phone buzzed. A mutual friend texted me. Hey, random question. Are you and your wife at that new bar downtown tonight? My heart dropped. I replied, no, why? There was a pause. Then, oh, never mind. Thought I saw her with someone who looked like you. I didn't answer after that. When she finally came home, she was in a good mood. Relaxed. Almost glowing. She kissed me on the cheek and said, sorry I'm late. Work ran long. I looked at her and realized something terrifyingly simple. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't hiding. She was confident. Confident that her version of events was still intact. Confident that if anything ever surfaced, she could explain it away the same way she always had. That was the moment the last piece fell into place. The messages, the calm, the distance, the way she'd slowly rewritten me as the problem. This wasn't just an affair. It was a parallel life, one where I existed only as background noise. And for the first time since this started, I felt something stronger than sadness or confusion. Resolve. Because once you see the full shape of the lie, the question stops being, is this really happening? It becomes, what am I going to do about it? After that night, I stopped thinking in terms of us. That realization hurt more than I expected. I'd spent years believing that no matter what happened, we were a unit. That even if things got messy, we'd face it together. But standing there, watching her lie to my face without hesitation, something shifted. I understood that the marriage I was trying to protect didn't exist anymore. So I made a different choice. I started documenting things quietly. Dates, times, the exact word she used when her stories didn't line up. Screenshots of messages that popped up when she forgot to silence her phone. I wasn't building a case out of anger. I was building clarity for myself. At the same time, I went back to acting normal. Not cold, not distant, just neutral. I stopped asking where she was going. Stopped checking in. Stopped offering emotional labor she no longer wanted. That unnerved her. One evening she asked, "You don't care anymore?" I looked at her and said, "Honestly, I care about not lying to myself." She didn't respond. She just nodded slowly, like she was recalculating something. That's when I realized she'd expected me to either explode or beg. Those were the roles she knew how to manage. Calm distance didn't fit her script. And while I wasn't ready for the final confrontation yet, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to be the last person in the room who didn't know the truth anymore. I confronted her a few days later, on a night that felt almost too normal. We were eating dinner, TV on in the background, the kind of quiet evening we'd had 1,000 times before. I turned the volume down and said, calmly, "We need to talk." She didn't tense up. That's what surprised me most. She didn't look scared or defensive. She looked prepared. I told her I knew she was seeing someone else. She laughed, not nervously, amused. "You're doing it again," she said, jumping to conclusions. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just listed facts. The messages, the late nights, the bar downtown, the way her stories didn't line up anymore. Her expression changed, not to guilt, but to irritation. "So what if I was?" she snapped. "Do you know how lonely I've been? Do you know how exhausting it is to feel married to someone who isn't really there?" There it was, the pivot. Within seconds, the conversation wasn't about her lying. It was about my shortcomings, my distance, my failure to notice her needs. She spoke fast, confidently, like she'd practiced this version of the conversation in her head many times. I asked her one question that stopped her cold. "How long were you planning to blame me for this?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time, she didn't have an answer ready. And in that silence, I realized something important. She hadn't just been cheating. She'd been preparing for this moment. After that confrontation, she didn't apologize. She didn't deny it anymore either. She shifted into something colder. She told me we were both unhappy, that things had been broken for a long time, that what she did wasn't ideal, but it was understandable. Every sentence carefully spread the blame, just enough that she never had to carry it alone. What she didn't expect was that I stopped engaging. I didn't argue timelines. I didn't defend myself. I didn't try to correct her version of events. I just listened. It seemed to unsettle her more than anger ever could. Over the next few days, cracks started showing. She forgot which version she'd told to whom. She told a friend we were mutually separating, then told her sister she was afraid of how I'd react. Those two stories collided when her sister reached out to me, confused and cautious. "Are you okay?" she asked. "She says you're not taking this well." That's when I realized she was already doing what I'd suspected all along, building the narrative. I didn't rush to counter it. I simply answered honestly, calmly, without emotion. "I'm okay," I said. "I found out she was cheating, and I'm figuring out my next steps." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. She hadn't expected me to speak plainly. She'd expected silence, shame, or rage. And slowly, quietly, the version of events she was trying to control began slipping out of her hands. Because stories fall apart when too many people start comparing notes. By the time her story started unraveling, something inside me had already settled. I realized I wasn't trying to fix the marriage anymore. I was trying to understand why I'd stayed so long in something that required me to constantly doubt my instincts. And once I saw that clearly, the idea of working on us felt wrong. Not impossible, just wrong. She sensed it. One night she asked, almost casually, "So what are you thinking? Counseling? A break?" There was a hopefulness in her voice that caught me off guard. Not hope for us, hope that this could still be managed. Framed as growth. Rewritten as mutual failure with a soft landing. "I'm thinking about what's real," I said. She frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means I don't want to repair something that only worked when I ignore myself." That's when she got defensive again. Told me I was being dramatic. That everyone has rough patches. That I was throwing away years over one mistake. One mistake. I didn't argue. I didn't correct her. I just said, "You didn't trip. You chose." Silence filled the room. That was the moment I chose reality over repair. Not because I hated her, but because staying would have meant agreeing to a version of events that never matched how I'd lived them. And once you stop lying to yourself, the next step becomes obvious. Once the decision was real, not hypothetical, not emotional, but final, everything slowed down. There were no dramatic blow-ups after that. No screaming matches. Just a quiet reorganization of life. We moved around each other carefully, like strangers sharing a space they both knew wouldn't be shared for long. What surprised me most was how my body reacted. I slept, deeply. For the first time in months, my mind stopped racing at night. The constant background noise, the doubt, the second-guessing, the replaying of conversations went quiet. I didn't feel happy yet, but I felt steady. She noticed. "You seem different," she said one evening. Detached. "I'm just not fighting reality anymore," I replied. That answer irritated her more than anger ever had. I think she expected grief, bargaining, chaos, something she could respond to. Calm didn't give her anything to work with. Friends started reaching out again, this time without that careful tone. A few admitted they'd been confused by what they'd heard. I didn't correct anyone aggressively. I didn't need to. The truth was already doing what it does when you stop interfering with it. Settling. Sitting alone in the quiet, I realized something important. I wasn't just losing a marriage. I was getting myself back. Just when things felt settled, she reached out again. Not angry. Not desperate. Calm. Carefully calm. She asked if we could talk one last time, for closure. Said she'd been doing a lot of thinking. That she wanted to be honest now. That therapy had helped her see her part in everything. I almost didn't go. But a part of me wanted to see her clearly one last time, without confusion, without hope, without fear. We met at a quiet cafe. Neutral ground. Public. Safe. She started with an apology, but it wasn't for the affair. It was for how things unfolded. For the stress. for the timing, for how hard it must have been for me. Then she shifted. She talked about loneliness, about how we'd grown apart, about how neither of us was fully present anymore. The words were smooth, balanced, almost reasonable. If I hadn't lived it, I might have believed her. At one point, she said, "I never meant to make you feel crazy." That sentence landed harder than anything else. Meant to. I realized then that this conversation wasn't about accountability. It was about editing the final version of the story, making sure it ended softly, mutually, without anyone clearly at fault. When she asked, "Do you think we both could have handled things better?" I answered honestly. "Yes," I said, by telling the truth when it mattered. Her expression cooled, just slightly. In that moment, I saw the same thing I'd seen all along, the need to control how things are remembered. I stood up, thanked her for the coffee, and left. Walking away, I felt something click into place. Not anger, not sadness, clarity, because closure doesn't come from conversations like that. It comes from recognizing when someone is still trying to manage the ending and choosing not to participate. Looking back now, the hardest part of all this wasn't discovering the affair. It was the slow erosion of trust in myself. When someone lies calmly, consistently, and confidently, you start to doubt your own instincts. You replay conversations. You question your memory. You wonder if you're imagining patterns that aren't there. That kind of damage doesn't happen overnight. It happens quietly, over time. What I learned is this: discomfort is data. If something feels off long before you can explain why, pay attention to that feeling. It's not paranoia. It's your mind trying to protect you before your heart is ready to accept the truth. Walking away didn't mean I failed. It meant I stopped agreeing to a version of reality that required me to disappear inside it. If you're reading this and you feel like you're constantly questioning your reactions, your tone, your sanity, pause. Look at patterns, not promises. Look at consistency, not explanations. And remember, you don't need permission to trust yourself. The moment I stopped questioning myself was the moment my life finally started moving forward again.